cognitive biases that influence political outcomes. So this is from a website here called visualcapitalist.com, and I think it's important because we're coming towards a big election in the United States of America, and just in the world in general, with the current pandemic, we've seen a lot of splits on certain things that should be done on political lines. And just in general, politics is something that is important. I know this has been one of those taboo topics, politics, sex, and religion, but we're beginning to see that these things are very important. I think the whole idea of having them being taboo is negative because they do affect other parts of your life. If you have certain things in your regular life that you consider you talk to someone about, there are chances that they have actual roots in their beliefs in politics, in their beliefs in religion, in their actual beliefs in sexuality and sexual expression and things like that. So I think these are core things, and as people talk about these things more, it's more important to be aware of some of the effects. And this is by Marcus Lowe. Now, I am familiar with cognitive biases and things like that, and I personally have my own cognitive biases, and I do make an attempt to avoid them. And the better way to avoid some of these things is to be aware of what they actually are. So I'll just read through this. It's an infographic and a document. It's on the screen, and it's also visualcapitalist.com. As I said, 11 cognitive biases and influences in politics. So cognitive biases in the political area. Politicians and media often use cognitive biases to sway public opinion and election outcomes. Some of the most common cognitive biases that can distort our political perspectives are the three big C's. I'm all over the place in the reading right now. Apologies. Okay, confirmation bias is the first one here. Favoring or seeking information that affirms your pre-existing beliefs. Politically related topics is polarization and filter bubbles. So filter bubbles, I think this means you're going to actually only allow certain things to come through, and other ones you're not going to actually have. Like some content is not going to be able to come through your filter due to different reasons. I guess they might actually go into. I think they go into it further below here. Let me see. Yeah, they actually go into some detail on the three C's. So that's there below. So I'll wait for that. Coverage bias. The extent to which different issues are reported on and discussed, politically related topics, horse race style coverage, and appeal to emotion. Concision bias. Selectively focusing on information, losing nuance, politically related topics, talking points, and sound bites. There are now other biases to be aware of, and it's talking about different heads here. Interesting infographic here. Authority bias. We are more likely to trust and be influenced by ideas that come from authority figures. An example is our CEO says that the state might tax disposable cups. Hey, I told you that last week. You said it would never happen. Now this happens, I think, a lot in whose authority do you actually recognize? And this, when it comes to political parties, some people don't recognize any actual authority from outside their preferred political party. Some people think some sources are already biased, so you're not an authority on this. Then it goes further to just saying, oh, you need a certain expert for that. And right now, there is talking about how Donald Trump, for example, is not an expert and he's saying certain things that's leading people, so we need to listen to the actual medical experts and what they say. I agree on that. Don't take anything Trump says on the medical aspect as medical advice. Listen to people who have actual proof and reasons behind that. Now, who are the actual people? But then they say that, and then you have like a town hall with Greta Thunberg who's on there. And this is an effect of the town hall, so she's not necessarily speaking directly about the coronavirus itself, but you could be talking about the general effects around it, which I guess anybody can have an opinion on that. Okay, so availability cascade. An idea accumulates more credibility as it spreads. I've heard from a bunch of people that he's going to raise taxes. There must be some truth to it. Now, this one is difficult because I think a lot of us, if you're not actually on the receiving end of this, you've been participatory or seen somebody that you know or care for that has been accused by a great group of people. Oh, so many people accuse this person of it, so it has to be right. That's not quite right. When people were accusing people of being a witch, a lot of people were doing it, but At least I think most of you who listen to this admit that the witches don't exist. Okay, Dunning-Kruger effect is the next one. The less you know, the more confident you are. And an example, I don't see why we can't just print more money to pay the debt down. Yeah, this one I just been surprised. I'm not okay, maybe not surprised because it makes sense when you look at the way the world is, but it's disappointing how few people actually understand the general basics of economics. Halo effect. Our overall impression of a person influences how we feel and think about his or her character. An example, I think she's too nice to be a good commander in chief. Yeah, that one's boo. You shouldn't have to be too nice. I think there's other things that should be actually held up for that. Okay, declinism. We romanticize the past and believe that society and institutions are in decline. The latest Supreme Court decision is just another example of how our country is falling apart these days. I am a presentist, or recentist, a current yearist in some sense, where I think this is the best time that I know of from actually looking at history to have been alive for various reasons, many, many reasons. I am Team Human. Humans are flourishing right now more than we ever have in the recorded history. So this whole idea, I think people who really think the good old days were the good old days don't know anything about the actual good old days. The framing effect. We draw different conclusions based on how an idea is presented to us. An example, Anchor A, government increases military spending. Government increases military spending in renewed commitment to veterans. Anchor B, amid record levels of debt, military spending balloons yet again. That's just the same thing has been happened, but how it's reported. And I think this is very important one that we often see. That's why I think if you are somebody that still gets news from mainstream sources, from establishment sources, try to find what you consider to be the counter of what you're listening to and see how they cover similar stories. Because you'll find one thing I've experienced, I listen to Al Jazeera, I listen to BBC, I listen to Sky News, I listen to MSNBC, I listen to Fox, I'll go to CNN sometimes, just to kind of see. One thing that's disturbing, that not disturbing, but it shows you that this is just a business, is they have the same format. They lead with certain type of stories at the start, then they go into the middle with others, and they finish off with like a nice human interaction. Well, what's the actual term? I'm forgetting the actual term. Human interest or something like that, where it's just a nice feel good story. And often you'll find them covering, these international stations will be covering the same stories. And like, is anything else going on in the world? Or has somehow the news field actually been studied to a point where they understand these are the stories that are actually going to get you eyes? It's a business. They still have to get people watching. When you see it on local news, that's one thing I noticed a lot more. Like here in Kenya, you'll have the different news channels, and they'll be covering the same news stories, and you're wondering, wow, just all the reporters going to these same locations? Anyway, next one, groupthink. Conforming to a widely held worldview in order to fit in and minimize conflict. Example, I don't like the person running for Congress, but I can't really vote for the other party. My family would disown me. This is a sad thing, and I think part of the whole don't discuss things is from this. You living with people who you're not allowed to be yourself or question certain things. Try to surround yourself and get yourself in an environment where you know these people will be for you, even if you change certain things, even if some things adjust, because you have a acceptance and belief and trust in the way they approach and break down things. So if something challenging comes to you, you have already surrounded yourself with people who will be able to take in this new information and work through it with you. If you just have a situation where, oh, if something's new, I don't want to deal with it. If something goes against the way I think, my mind has decided I can't take any more information on this, it's going to show up in other parts of your life when you actually need them the most, in my experience and from my observations. The last one is false consensus. Overestimating the proportion of people who agree with the idea. Example, I think the majority of people agree that this policy makes sense. Everyone I know thinks so. And again, this thing, if you don't really talk to people about certain things, then you don't know what everyone really thinks so. You just know what everybody has agreed to not talk about or to accept as the truth. Because when it actually comes down to conversation, these topics are never discussed. So please pay close attention to these hidden biases and prevent yourself from being influenced by these flawed patterns of thinking. This is something that I think is thankful. I have these biases. I try to work through them. If you can think of some yourself. So let's go into here and they actually break it down. So cognitive biases in the political arena. With the 2020 U.S. political election fast approaching, many people will be glued to the 24-hour news cycle to stay up to date with the political developments. Yet, when searching for facts, our own cognitive biases often get in our way. If this isn't problematic enough, third parties can also take advantage of these biases to influence our thinking. The media, for example, can exploit our tendency to assign stereotypes to others by only providing catchy surface level information. Once established in our minds, these generalizations can be tough to shake off. Such tactics can have a powerful influence on public opinion if applied consistently to a broad audience. To help us avoid these mental pitfalls, today's infographic from lists lists common cognitive biases that influence the realm of politics, including the big C's. The first C, confirmation bias. People exhibit confirmation bias when they seek information that only affirms their pre existing beliefs. This can cause them to become overly rigid in their political opinions, even when presented with conflicting ideas or evidence. When too many people fall victim of this bias, progress towards solving complex sociopolitical issues is thwarted. That's because solving these issues is in a bipartisan system requires cooperation from both sides of the spectrum. A reluctance towards establishing a common ground is often widespread in America. According to a 2019 survey, 70% of Democrats believe their party's leaders should stand up to President Trump, even if less gets done in Washington. Conversely, 51% of Republicans believe that Trump should stand up to Democrats. In light of these developments, researchers have conducted studies to determine if the issue of confirmation bias is as prevalent as it seems. In one experiment, participants chose to either support or oppose given sociopolitical support or oppose a given sociopolitical issue. Then they were then presented with evidence that was conflicting, affirming, or a combination of both. In all scenarios, participants were most likely to stick with their initial decisions. Of those who presented with conflicting evidence, just 1 in 5 changed their stance. Furthermore, participants who maintained their initial positions became even more confident in the superiority of their decision. A testament to how influential confirmation bias can be. The second C, coverage bias. Coverage bias in the context of politics is a form of media bias where certain politicians or topics are disproportionately covered. In some cases, media outlets can even twist stories to fit a certain narrative. For example, research from the University of South Florida analyzed media coverage of President Trump's 2017 travel ban. It was discovered that primetime media hosts covered the ban through completely different perspectives. Here's a quote. Each host varied drastically in tone, phrasing, and facts of emphasis, presenting each issue in a manner that aligns with a specific partisan agenda. This is by Bryce Joseph in 2017. Charting the ideological placement of each source's audience can help us gain a better understanding of the coverage bias at work. In other words, where do people on the left, middle, and right get their views? So ideological placement for each source. So you can see the Daily Show. The furthest on the left is New Yorker and Slate. Seems like consistently liberal. Then Daily Show, the Guardian, Al Jazeera America, NPR, New York Times. Then BuzzFeed, PBS, BBC, Huffington Post, Washington Post, The Economist, Politico, and NBC News, CNN, MSNBC, CBS News, Google News, Bloomberg, ABC, USA Today. See, this is a lot of them on that side. Then now, when you're approaching zero, Yahoo, Wall Street Journal. Down the other side, going towards consistently conservative, Fox News, Drudge Report, Breitbart, Rush Limbaugh Style, The Blaze, Sean Hannity Program, Glenn Beck Program. Now you see, this is partly why something like Fox News will have a lot more viewers than CNN and MSNBC and CNN and MSNBC combined in some times, because you're splitting between very many, at least more sources on the left to find certain information than on the right. So I think that's one of the things that you see there. Okay, the horizontal axis in this graphic corresponds to the ideological consistency scale, which is composed of 10 questions. For each question, respondents are assigned with a -1 for a liberal response and a +1 for a conservative response, or a 0 for other responses. A summation of these scores places respondents in one of 5 categories: consistently conservative +7 to +10, mostly conservative +3 to +6, mixed -2 to +2, mostly liberal -6 to -3, consistently liberal -6 to -7. You see Fox is here, matching up with the PBS and they happen to be around at the same point where CNN and MSNBC. So they're kind of like mirror images there. But you can see there's a lot more on the left towards more consistently liberal. Overcoming coverage bias, which dovetails into other biases like confirmation bias, may require us to follow a wider variety of sources, even those we may not initially agree with. The third, concision bias. Concision bias is a type of bias where politicians or the media selectively focus on aspects of information that are easy to get across. In the process, more nuanced and delicate views get omitted from popular discourse. A common application of concision bias is the use of sound bites, which are short clips that can be taken out of a politician's speech. When played in isolation, these clips may leave out important context for the audience. Without the proper context, multifaceted issues can become extremely polarizing and may be a reason for the growing partisan divide in America. In fact, there is less overlap in the political values of Republicans and Democrats than ever previously measured. In 1994, 64% of Republicans were more conservative than the median Democrat. By 2017, that margin had grown considerably to 95% of Republicans. The same trend can be found on the other end of the spectrum, whereas 70% were more liberal than the median Republican in 1994. This proportion increased to 97% by 2017. Overcoming our biases. Achieving full self-awareness can be difficult, especially when new biases emerge in our constantly evolving world. So where do we begin? Simply remembering these mental pitfalls exist can be a great start. After all, we can't fix what we don't know. Individuals concerned about the upcoming presidential election may find it useful to focus their attention on the big C's, and these biases can play a significant role in shaping political beliefs, maintaining an open mindset and diversifying the media sources we follow are two tactics that may act as a hedge. Okay, so that was it, and this is just part of my reading series where I read different things. And one thing I'd like to add here, not only listening to different media sources, try to go on social media, try to go to these websites, and there are some websites where sometimes I'll go to the Bright comment section and just see some horrific things. I'm just like, wow, this is gruesome. Then I'll go to like a Huffington Post or some other place and you see some other things. Try to go and actually engage with people. Try to find people in your life. This is why I'm saying it's most important for me with this one is for people in your actual life. Even if there are people that you do agree with politically, try to get into a discussion with them to see if they have certain bases. Because even the reasons behind you having an agreement on things could bring up some interesting conversations where you're like, oh, you see it because of this, I see it because of that. And then there might be some things where you realize both of you or none of you could have none of you could actually have some valid reasons. Then you go and look to actually have those valid reasons. You might not know directly people in your life. You might have self-selected already your group where you don't have people who have opposing views, but you never know. They could be people who you think are valuable and still are, even despite these views that they have, that you're told these are evil people. Then you find out like, oh, these people are actually just human beings and they have different views on things. You might be able to change someone's mind or something. They may change your mind or something, but it's good to diversify where you're coming from on these things. Until next one, there's going to be links below to our merchandise store. You can like, share, and subscribe wherever you listen to this. Appreciate you taking your time. Let me know about your own cognitive biases and how you've recovered over some of them, or by listening to this or seeing this, are they some that you now realize, oh, I actually might be suffering from this. I might be being affected by this. Till next time, goodbye.
That's Kenyatta National Hospital and Nairobi Hospital back there. This is on Gong Road.